My name is Thomas Carter. At 68 years old, I stood on the edge of the sidewalk watching strangers dismantle my life piece by piece, like it was nothing more than a job scheduled on a Tuesday morning. Boxes moved fast. Furniture followed. A man in a neon vest carried out the oak table my wife and I had eaten at for decades. Another hauled the china cabinet Mary used to polish every Sunday like it was sacred. One of the movers paused when he noticed me staring. He gave me a polite, almost rehearsed smile. "Sir, you here to grab something before we wrap up?" I blinked at him, slow, disoriented. "No," I said quietly. "I think you're taking everything." The smile faded. He frowned slightly. "I thought the owner already moved out." I met his eyes. "I am the owner." Before he could respond, the front door creaked open. Daniel stepped out. My son. He held a manila envelope in one hand, like it weighed more than it should. His posture was stiff, his shoulders tight, not guilty, just uncomfortable. Like a man stuck in a situation he didn't want to fully acknowledge. "Hi, Dad." That was it. No hug, no warning, no explanation. Just two words, casual, almost careless, as if we had bumped into each other at a grocery store, instead of standing in the front yard where I taught him how to throw a baseball, where we built a treehouse together, where his mother planted roses. Every spring, until cancer took her 12 years earlier. My gaze drifted past him. The moving truck was nearly full. Mary's rocking chair, the one she gave me on our 25th anniversary, vanished behind the steel door. With a hollow clang, something tightened in my chest. I looked back at Daniel. "What is this?" He inhaled slowly, like he had rehearsed this moment. "We sold the house." For a second, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes reality hits so hard, your mind refuses to accept it. "You sold my house." It was the practical thing to do. "My name is on the deed." He shifted his weight, eyes avoiding mine. "You signed a power of attorney before your surgery." The words landed like a blunt, force hit to the ribs. 6 weeks earlier, I had gone in for knee replacement surgery. Recovery hadn't gone as planned. I ended up in rehab longer than expected. Daniel handled the paperwork. I focused on learning how to walk again. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. "I signed that so you could pay my bills," I said, my voice dropping. "Not sell my home. It gave me authority. It wasn't yours to use like that." He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable now. "The lawyer said everything was legal." Legal, that word. People love hiding behind it when they know damn well something isn't right. A woman I didn't recognize stepped out of the house holding a clipboard. "Daniel, closing documents are loaded," she called out. Closing. So it was done. Not in progress, not reversible. Done. I turned toward the porch. The brass wind chime Mary bought at a craft fair years ago still hung by the door. A light breeze caught it, sending out a soft, familiar melody. For a moment, I could almost hear her voice. Then one of the movers reached up, yanked it down, and dropped it into a cardboard box without a second thought. Something inside me cracked. Melissa walked out next. Designer sunglasses, spotless white sneakers, ready for the road. "We need to go if we're going to make Kentucky before dark," she said. Like we were discussing traffic, not the collapse of a man's entire life. She handed me the envelope. "What's this?" "Something to help you get started." I opened it. One crisp $100 bill. Folded neatly beside it, a torn piece of notebook paper. 4 words. In Daniel's handwriting, "You'll figure it out." I read it once, then again, then a third time, like maybe the words would change if I gave them enough chances. They didn't. I looked up slowly. "You left me $100. You've always been resourceful. Melissa crossed her arms. We're giving you independence. I blinked. Independence? We didn't think you'd want to spend the rest of your life in some assisted living facility. I never asked for that. We figured you'd rather make your own choices. I stared at both of them. I didn't know being homeless was one of my choices. Neither of them answered. The silence stretched, long and heavy, until Daniel finally spoke. We're moving to North Carolina. Better schools for Tyler. My grandson is 14, I said slowly. He deserves opportunities. I met his eyes, so I don't? His gaze dropped. We couldn't afford 2 households. I almost reminded him he had never paid a mortgage in his life. That house had been paid off for years. There wasn't a single payment left. Selling it hadn't saved him. It had made him rich. Money Mary and I spent decades earning, sacrificing for, protecting. I swallowed all of that and asked the only question that mattered. Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? Daniel hesitated. There are motels. You can manage with 100. Melissa sighed. Dad, you're tougher than you think. Funny. She could still call me Dad, while helping erase every trace that I ever had a family. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson slowly walked over. Her eyes were red. She didn't say a word, just wrapped her arms around me. Then she turned to Daniel. I hope your children never learn from this. Daniel looked away. Melissa muttered something under her breath. The trucks pulled off one by one. Within minutes, 43 years of memories disappeared down the street. All that remained were tire marks and silence. Daniel handed me a duffel bag. We packed your clothes, medications too. I took it. It felt light, too light. Everything else, every photo, every tool, every letter Mary had ever written me gone. I guess that's it, he said. I nodded. I guess it is. He lingered, like he expected something. Anger, tears, a scene. Instead, I reached into the envelope and folded the $100 bill carefully back inside. I'll keep this. His face softened. I knew you'd understand. I almost smiled. He didn't understand anything. I turned and walked toward my old pickup truck. It had close to 200,000 miles on it. But it still started every morning. Unlike people, machines usually kept their promises. Mrs. Henderson caught up with me. Tom, please come stay with us. I squeezed her hand gently. I appreciate it. You don't have to go through this alone. I know, but something inside me needed something else. Not advice. Not comfort. Silence. I drove until the sun dipped low on the horizon. Eventually, I pulled into a quiet truck stop outside Columbus, parked under a flickering overhead light. The cab smelled like motor oil and old coffee. I leaned the seat back as far as it would go. My new bedroom. I unfolded the note one last time. You'll figure it out. For the first time all day, I agreed with my son. I will, I whispered into the dark. But not the way you think. That night, lying alone inside an aging pickup truck, with $100 to my name, I made a promise. A quiet one, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. I would never ask my son for another penny. And someday, whether he cared or not, he would understand exactly what he had thrown away. The first morning after sleeping in my truck, I woke up stiff, sore, and disoriented. My back ached. My knee throbbed. And for the first time in over 40 years, I had no idea where I belonged. For decades, my mornings had been predictable. I knew which floorboard would creak under my weight. I knew how the sunlight would cut through the kitchen window. I knew exactly where Mary kept the coffee filters, even years after she was gone. Now I was standing in a truck stop restroom, brushing my teeth while 18-wheelers roared past outside like distant thunder. Life changes fast. Pride changes faster. I sat behind the wheel, staring at the $100 bill in my hands. For a brief moment, I considered calling Daniel. Not to beg. Just one question. Why? But I already knew the truth. Whatever answer he gave wouldn't change where I had slept, or where I was about to sleep again. So I folded the money, tucked it back into my wallet, and started the engine. No more looking backward. I drove toward downtown Columbus. Around noon, I parked outside a Church Mary, and I used to visit whenever we were in the city. I wasn't expecting help. I wasn't expecting anything. Really. Just a place to sit, somewhere quiet enough to think. Before I even reached the front door, it opened. Tom? Pastor Robert stood there, eyes wide with surprise. I heard you had surgery, he said, stepping closer. I did. He looked down at my legs. You're walking already? I gave a small shrug. Didn't have much of a choice. Something in my tone made him pause. The smile faded just enough for concern to slip through. Come inside. An hour later, I had told him everything. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush me, didn't offer advice halfway through. He just listened. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, quiet for a moment. I've been counseling families for over 30 years, he said slowly. Sometimes strangers treat each other better than blood. I nodded. I'm not here for anyone to fix this. I know. I just need somewhere to stand long enough to figure out my next step. He studied me for a second, then smiled. Then let's start there. The church had a small apartment above the old fellowship hall. Nothing fancy. A bed, a sink, a window that stuck halfway when you tried to open it. But it was empty. And more importantly, it was quiet. It's not much, Pastor Robert said. It's perfect. He refused to charge me rent. I refused to take charity. So we compromised. I would fix things. Doors that stuck, cabinets that sagged, pews that squeaked, hinges that groaned. By the end of the first week, I had repaired nearly everything in that building that made a noise. Working with my hands again felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Mary used to laugh when I fixed things around the house. You don't just fix furniture, she'd say. You fix yourself. Back then, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Every screw I tightened quieted something inside me. Every broken hinge reminded me of something simple. Damage doesn't mean worthless. One afternoon, while I was replacing trim in the fellowship hall, an elderly woman walked in carrying a rocking chair with a cracked leg. I heard there's a man here who can fix anything. I smiled. That's a dangerous rumor. She chuckled, setting the chair down carefully. My husband built this 50 years ago. I crouched beside it, running my hand along the wood grain. Solid oak. Good craftsmanship. The leg hadn't failed. Time had. I think I can help. She looked relieved. How much do you charge? I thought about it for a second. $20. She frowned. That's it? It's about 2 hours of work. She shook her head. No wonder the pastor likes you. 3 days later, she came back. Not just for the chair. She brought 2 more pieces. Then her sister called. Then a neighbor. Then someone from another church across town. Within a month, that little apartment started to look less like a place to sleep and more like a workshop. Chairs lined the walls, tables stacked in corners, cabinet doors leaned against the sink. Pastor Robert walked in one evening and stopped dead in the doorway. I think we've officially outgrown the guest room. I laughed. You might be right. That was when Hank heard about me. Retired mechanic, lived just outside town. Owned an old repair shop he barely used anymore. I've got space, he said after Sunday service. You've got skills. Seems like a waste not to connect the two. We drove out there that afternoon. The building had once been a busy auto garage. Now it sat quiet. Dust covered everything. But underneath, it was solid. Good bones. Strong beams. Wide work bays. Real workbenches. I can't afford commercial rent, I told him. He waved me off. Then, don't. I don't take charity. It's not charity. He pointed at a row of broken cabinets stacked against the wall. Fix this place up. Get your business moving. You can stay as long as you need. I studied him for a moment. No paperwork. No contracts. No fine print. Just a handshake. I extended my hand. He took it. That was enough. Over the next few weeks, I worked from sunrise to sunset. Cleaning, painting, rewiring, rebuilding. By the time I finished, the place didn't look abandoned anymore. It looked alive, and slowly so did I. Word spread. People started showing up, dropping off pieces from all over central Ohio. Some were cheap, some were priceless. But I treated every single one the same. Because I wasn't just fixing furniture. I was restoring memories. And for the first time since that day on the sidewalk, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was focused on what I could still build. Somewhere along the way, without even noticing it, life got loud again. Around Christmas, something unexpected happened. A local newspaper ran a small story about the workshop. Nothing flashy, no dramatic headlines, just a quiet human interest piece tucked between ads and obituaries. Retired carpenter gives family heirlooms a second life. That was the title. The reporter had asked me what inspired it. I told her the truth. I know what it feels like to lose something you thought you'd have forever. That was all she needed. After the article came out, everything changed. Not overnight, but steadily, undeniably. More calls, more work, more people showing up with things they couldn't bring themselves to throw away. A dining table with burn marks from a house fire. A dresser scarred by years of use. A cedar chest that had survived 3 generations but barely. Each piece came with a story, and more often than not, that story mattered more than the wood itself. One afternoon, a young woman walked into the shop, carrying an old cedar chest. She held it carefully, like it might fall apart if she breathed too hard. "It belonged to my grandmother," she said. The lid barely opened. One side was warped from water damage. Everyone else told me it's not worth fixing. I ran my hand across the grain. The wood was tired, but not done. "I think it is." She looked at me, hopeful but unsure. "Are you sure?" I met her eyes. Worth fixing and worth replacing aren't the same thing. She came back 2 weeks later. The moment she saw it, she froze. Her hand covered her mouth. "It looks exactly like I remember." I shook my head gently. "No, it looks like she remembers." She didn't say anything else, just hugged me, tight, before walking out. Moments like that became my paycheck. Not the money, the meaning. Word spread faster than I ever expected. People started driving in from other cities. Sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3. One antique dealer from Cincinnati called and asked if I could restore an entire collection. I said yes. Another dealer recommended me to a historical society. Then a museum reached out. Then another. Soon, I had more work than I could handle alone. That was when I realized something strange. I wasn't thinking about Daniel every day anymore. The anger didn't disappear. It just lost. Lost the argument against purpose. Pain has a voice, but purpose speaks louder. One evening, Pastor Robert stopped by the shop. He looked around at the half-finished chairs, the stacked tables, the tools laid out across every surface. "You've been busy." I nodded. I forgot how much I love this. He smiled slightly. I don't think you forgot. I looked at him. I think life just got loud. That stuck with me. Life had been loud for a long time. Mortgage payments, work deadlines, raising a child, hospital visits, funerals, responsibilities stacking up until the quiet things disappeared. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped building because I enjoyed it. I was building because I had to. Now, at nearly 70, I was building again because I wanted to. And that made all the difference. Business kept growing, not because I advertised, because people talked. Satisfied customers tell stories, and stories travel further than any billboard ever could. Within months, I hired my first employee. Marcus, 24 years old, Army veteran. Struggled to find steady work after coming home. He showed up early, stayed late, asked questions most people were too proud to ask. 3 months later, I hired another. Then another, slowly, almost without realizing it. I wasn't just rebuilding furniture anymore. I was rebuilding people, including myself. Sometimes customers would ask about my family. I kept it simple. They're living their lives. That was enough. I never spoke badly about Daniel. Not because he deserved protecting, because bitterness is expensive. And I had already lost enough. Winter turned into spring. One evening, after locking up the shop, I stood outside, looking at the faded sign above the door. It still read, Hank's Auto Repair. I smiled to myself. Maybe it was time for something new. Not because I needed recognition, but because for the first time in a long time, I believed I had a future worth putting my name on. The first real sign that my little workshop had become something bigger wasn't the money. It was the waiting list. One Monday morning, Marcus walked into my office holding a clipboard. His expression caught somewhere between impressed and confused. Mr. Carter, yeah? We're booked 6 months out. I looked up from the workbench where I was restoring a walnut secretary desk. What? He handed me the schedule. Every slot. Filled. Customers from Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Pennsylvania, even a family from Virginia willing to drive 8 hours just to drop off a single piece. All because they'd heard about the old man in Columbus who could bring broken things back to life. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Well, I said, exhaling. Guess we better get to work. Marcus grinned. I've been saying that for weeks. I laughed. But this time, it felt different. Years ago, I laughed because reality had become too painful to process. Now, I laughed because life had surprised me in a way I never saw coming. That spring, we officially changed the name. The old, weathered sign came down. In its place, a new one, hand-carved, sanded smooth, finished by our own hands, went up. Carter Heritage Restoration. Hank stood beside me during the small ribbon cutting. He ran his fingers along the edge of the sign, nodding quietly. You know, he said, this place looks better than it ever did when I owned it. You gave me a chance. He shook his head. No, Tom. I gave you a building. He gestured around the shop. You turned it into something people believe in. I never forgot that. Buildings are made of wood and steel. Businesses are built on trust. One afternoon, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Out stepped a woman in a tailored coat, carrying a leather portfolio like she meant business. Marcus leaned toward me. She looks expensive. I smirked. Let's hope she is. She introduced herself as Rachel Morrison, an interior designer from Cleveland. One of her clients owned a historic mansion built in the late 1800s. Nearly every original piece of furniture inside needed restoration. How many pieces? I asked. She opened the portfolio. 37. I nearly dropped my coffee. It was the largest project we'd ever been offered. I'll need to think about it. She raised an eyebrow. Most people say yes immediately. Most people don't know what they're promising. I spent 2 days studying every photograph, every crack, every warped panel, every hidden challenge waiting beneath the surface. Then I called her back. Yes. The project took 9 months. 9 long, meticulous months. Every table, every chair, every cabinet, every carved headboard. Some pieces demanded hundreds of hours. But when we finished, it was like watching time reverse itself. The homeowner walked through the mansion in silence, room by room, his fingers brushing across polished surfaces, restored edges, revived grain. Finally, he turned to me. My grandfather would have cried. I smiled faintly. So did your furniture. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? It was asking someone not to give up on it. He didn't respond right away. Then, he extended his hand. I'll never hire anyone else. Neither did his friends. Within a year, luxury hotels, historical societies, and museums started reaching out. Not because we advertised, because people talked. And in my experience, word travels faster when it carries meaning. Then came television. A local station wanted to film a short feature. I almost said no. I've never liked cameras. Marcus talked me into it. It's good for the business. The reporter spent an entire day in the shop, but she didn't ask about tools or techniques. She asked about something else. Why restore instead of replace? I picked up an old dining chair with a cracked frame. Replacing is faster. I ran my hand along the fracture. Restoration respects the story. She tilted her head. What story? This chair has seen birthdays, Christmas dinners, arguments, homework, grandchildren climbing on it. I looked at her. Wood remembers. I paused. So do people. The interview aired on a Sunday night. By Tuesday morning, our phones wouldn't stop ringing. Orders doubled. Again. Success came with something I hadn't expected. A limit. I couldn't do everything myself anymore. At 74, my hands were still steady. But time doesn't negotiate. Marcus walked into my office holding a stack of applications. We need more people. I know. But not just workers. I looked at him. What do you mean? We need craftsmen. He was right. Anyone can sand wood. Not everyone understands why an 80-year-old widow cries when you return her husband's chair, looking exactly the way she remembers it. Skill matters. But heart matters more. So we started something new. An apprenticeship program. Young men, young women, veterans, single parents, people trying to start over, people who needed a second chance. On their first day, I told them the same thing. We're not in the furniture business. Every time someone would ask, then what business are we in? I'd smile. We're in the memory business. A few years later, a streaming documentary team reached out. They were filming stories about traditional American craftsmanship. They wanted one episode to focus on restoration. I almost turned them down. Again, Marcus laughed. You're getting predictable. I don't like attention. You like helping people. He shrugged. This helps more people find you. He was right. The crew followed us for nearly 2 weeks. Interviewed customers, filmed the process, captured the stories behind the wood. One woman brought in her father's old military trunk. I thought it was beyond saving, she said. Then she looked at me. You gave me another 20 years with my dad. You never really do in moments like that. 6 months later, the documentary aired. I watched it alone in the workshop after closing. Near the end, the interviewer asked me a question. Have you ever lost something you loved? I hesitated, then answered. 14 years ago. Someone left me with $100 and told me I'd figure it out. She stayed quiet. So, did you? I smiled slightly. I figured out something they never expected. What's that? I looked straight into the camera. No one can sell your future. That line traveled further than I ever imagined. Letters started arriving. Veterans, widows, divorced fathers, teachers, cancer survivors. Some thanked me for restoring furniture. Most thanked me for something else. Hope. Money came faster than I ever thought possible. For the first time in my life, I had more than enough. I could have bought a big house, a luxury car, taken expensive vacations. I didn't. I kept driving the same old pickup, packed my own lunch, swept the shop floor every night before locking up. Marcus used to tease me. You know you're the richest guy in the building, right? I picked up a broom and grinned. I also own this. He laughed. So I use it. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. From the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. I read it 3 times. Then looked around the workshop. I remembered sleeping in my truck. I remembered wondering if anyone cared whether I existed. Nobody should start adulthood feeling like they've already been left behind. I called Marcus into the office. We're starting something new. He sat down. What kind of project? I shook my head. Not a project. I looked him in the eye. A promise. Within a year, Carter Heritage Restoration launched a program that did more than teach a trade. It gave people a future. Watching those kids grow, watching confidence replace fear, reminded me of something I almost forgot. The greatest thing you can build isn't furniture. It's people. I never imagined a quiet interview in a small Ohio workshop would travel far beyond the state. But somewhere, hundreds of miles away, someone who shared my last name was about to hear that story for the very first time. I didn't return a single phone call for 8 days. Not out of anger, not for revenge. I simply wasn't ready to reopen a chapter that had taken 14 years to close. Every voicemail sounded the same. Please call me. I'm sorry. We need to talk. Different voices. Same desperation. Same regret. Then one message broke the pattern. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Melissa. It was Ethan. His voice was younger than I expected. Nervous. Careful. Like he was stepping into a conversation he wasn't sure he had the right to start. Hi, Grandpa. He paused. I don't even know if I should call you that. Another pause. I'm not calling because of money. I don't want anything. His voice tightened slightly. I'd really like to meet you. Silence stretched for a few seconds. If you don't want to, I understand. A breath. But if you ever change your mind. His voice cracked. I'd like to know the man everyone else seems to admire. The message ended. I sat there for a long time. Then I played it again. And again. Marcus walked into my office, holding a stack of invoices. You okay? Instead of answering, I handed him the phone. He listened quietly. When it ended, he looked at me. That's not your son. I shook my head. No. He handed the phone back. That's a kid, looking for his grandfather. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. I know. He crossed his arms. So what are you going to do? I didn't answer right away. Through the office window, I watched the workshop floor. Apprentices laughing. Sawdust floating through sunlight. The quiet rhythm of people building something that mattered. For years, I had taught them one thing above everything else. Don't punish someone for damage they didn't cause. Children don't inherit broken furniture. And they don't inherit guilt. Finally, I exhaled. I'm going to meet my grandson. We chose a Saturday morning, not a restaurant. Not my office. The workshop. If Ethan wanted to know who I was, he needed to see the place that rebuilt me. I arrived early. Old habits don't fade. Coffee in one hand, keys in the other. The smell of walnut, cherry wood, and fresh sawdust greeted me like an old friend. By 10 o'clock, the shop was quiet. I had sent everyone home. This wasn't a moment for an audience. At 10:15, a silver SUV pulled into the lot. Only one person stepped out. Tall, lean, nervous energy in every movement. He looked around first, then spotted me standing in the doorway. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then he smiled. It hit me instantly. Daniel's smile, but softer, kinder. "You must be Ethan." He nodded. "Hi." He let out an awkward laugh. "I've been practicing saying that all week." I chuckled. "Me too." He walked closer, hesitating just slightly. "I wasn't sure if I should hug you." I wasn't sure either. So we shook hands. Then, almost at the same time, we both laughed. And just like that, the tension cracked. "Come inside." For the next 2 hours, I showed him everything. The workshop, the finishing room, the restoration area, the training space. Every station told part of the story. Every tool had a purpose. Every apprentice who crossed our path stopped to say hello. "Morning, Mr. Carter." "Hey, Tom." Ethan noticed. "They really like you." I smiled faintly. "I hope they respect me." He looked around again. "I think it's both." We stopped beside an old oak table, half burned along one edge. "What happened to this?" "House fire." He ran his fingers near the damaged area. "Can it be saved?" I placed my hand over the charred wood. "It'll always carry the scar." He frowned slightly. "So it won't look perfect?" I shook my head. "No." Then I met his eyes. "But we don't erase the damage." I tapped the surface lightly. "We make it part of the story." He smiled slowly. "I like that." I nodded. "It works for people too." Around lunchtime, we sat in the break room. Simple sandwiches, paper cups. Quiet. Not awkward. Just honest. After a while, Ethan looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry." I frowned. "For what?" "My family." I leaned forward slightly. "You didn't sell my house." "I know." "You didn't leave me $100. "No." "You didn't tell me to figure it out." He swallowed hard. "But they're my parents." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "Listen carefully." He looked up. "Children don't inherit guilt." His eyes filled with tears. I felt awful after watching that documentary. "I know." I kept thinking. His voice trembled. "If I had known you earlier, you were a child. I could have called. You didn't know. I should have asked more questions." I smiled gently. "And now you are." For the first time since he arrived, he relaxed. Really relaxed. That's when another car pulled into the lot. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Daniel stepped out first. Melissa followed a few feet behind. They both looked older, worn down, like life had taken more than it had given. Daniel walked toward the building slowly, not like a man coming home, like a man walking toward judgment. Marcus glanced through the window. "You want me to ask them to leave?" I shook my head. "No." "You sure?" I took a slow breath. I waited 14 years. I looked toward the door. "I can wait 5 more minutes." Marcus nodded and disappeared into the back. Daniel stopped a few feet in front of me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he glanced around the workshop. "I've seen pictures." His voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't understand. I nodded. "No, you didn't." He looked at everything. The tools, the workstations, The framed articles, the awards, the photographs of apprentices standing beside, finished pieces. This, he swallowed hard. You built all of this? With a lot of help. He covered his face briefly with one hand. I thought. He stopped. Tried again. I honestly thought. After we left. His voice broke. You'd end up in a nursing home. I know. He looked up, eyes red. I never imagined. I know. Melissa stepped forward, tears running freely now. We told ourselves it was temporary. Neither of us responded. She kept going. We said we'd check on you once we got settled. Her voice shook. Then months passed. Then years. And it got harder to admit what we did. Daniel stared at the floor. I was ashamed. I answered quietly. You should have been. He nodded immediately. I was. Every day. Finally, he looked at me. I've replayed that day. Thousands of times. I held his gaze. So have I. For the first time in 14 years, he wasn't defending himself. He was telling the truth. And whether that truth would be enough, I still didn't know. But for the first time, it felt like something real had finally begun. No one moved. For what felt like a full minute, the entire workshop held its breath. Outside, a light rain began tapping softly against the windows. Inside, 3 generations stood surrounded by furniture that had survived fire, water, neglect, and time. I couldn't ignore the irony. People had always brought me broken things because they believed they could still be saved. Now my own family stood in front of me, broken, waiting to see if I believed the same about them. Daniel cleared his throat. I've rehearsed this conversation for weeks. I shook my head gently. You don't owe me an explanation. His shoulders dropped. I owe you one, maybe. I held his gaze. But explanations and excuses often wear the same clothes. He nodded slowly. I know. We stood there, not arguing, not defending, just telling the truth. For the first time in a long time, Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I brought something. He handed it to me. I opened it. Inside was a cashier's check. The number made me pause. It wasn't just the value of the house. It included everything. Every dollar he had gained. Years of accumulated interest. He swallowed hard. I sold our house for this. He looked away. I know it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't. I don't expect you to cash it. He took a breath. I brought it because it was never mine. I studied the check for a moment. Then I folded it carefully and handed it back. No. He blinked, confused. Dad, I don't want it. You earned it. I shook my head slowly. No. I gave a small, tired smile. I earned it long before you sold the house. His hand lowered. What am I supposed to do with it? That's your decision. He stared down at it, like it had suddenly become heavier. I've been carrying the weight of this money for 14 years. I believe you. And you don't want it back? I looked around the workshop. The beams, the workbenches, the apprentices, the furniture waiting to be restored. The life I had built from nothing. I already turned $100 into everything you see here. I met his eyes. I don't need the rest. And the tumman. Ethan quietly wiped his face. Overwhelmed. I don't think I'll ever forget that. I hope not. Daniel stood there, still holding the check. For the first time, he wasn't a man defending his decision, he was a man facing it. A few weeks later, he called again. This time, I answered. Not because everything was fixed, because healing doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in conversations. Sometimes many of them. We talked for hours. About his mistakes. About my silence. About Mary. About fear. Eventually, he said something that caught me off guard. I wasn't trying to get rid of you. I didn't respond right away. I was scared. Of what? He exhaled slowly. Watching you get old. The honesty in his voice surprised both of us. When Mom died, he continued, I convinced myself I could solve every problem. You couldn't. No. When your surgery happened, he shook his head. I panicked. You made a terrible decision. He gave a bitter laugh. I made a lot of them. I kept telling myself I'd fix everything later. I nodded. Later is a dangerous word. He looked at me. It became 14 years. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then I asked the question that had lived inside me since that day. Why the note? He closed his eyes briefly. I wish I had a good answer. You don't? No. His voice broke slightly. I wrote it because I needed to believe you'd be okay. I studied him. You weren't trying to encourage me. He shook his head. I was trying to comfort myself. Silence settled between us. Then, quietly, yes, that was the truth. Raw, uncomfortable, but real. And sometimes, that's where healing actually begins. Forgiveness didn't arrive all at once. It didn't happen in a single conversation. There was no dramatic moment. No embrace that suddenly erased 14 years of silence. It came quietly, slowly, in small, ordinary moments that didn't look important at the time. Daniel started calling every Sunday. Sometimes we talked for 10 minutes. Sometimes for 2 hours. Some conversations were easy. Others weren't. We talked about things we should have talked about years earlier. His mistakes, my loneliness, Mary, the surgery, the silence that followed. There were pauses, long ones, the kind where neither person knows what to say next. But we stayed on the line anyway. That mattered. Melissa didn't call. She wrote. A real letter. Handwritten. No text messages. No emails. Ink on paper. She didn't explain. Didn't justify. Didn't blame stress or timing or anyone else. She just told the truth, and she apologized. I read that letter twice. Then I sat down and wrote back. 3 sentences. That was all. Thank you for telling the truth. I forgive you. Now live differently. That was enough. Ethan became a regular part of my life. Every few months, he drove up from North Carolina to Ohio. Not out of obligation. Out of choice. He wanted to learn. The first time he picked up a hand plane, he looked at me like he was holding something fragile. I've never done this before. I smiled. Neither had I. The first time. He laughed. It broke the tension. Over time, he learned the basics. How to repair dovetail joints. How to match wood grain. How to finish walnut without hiding its character. But more importantly, he learned patience. One Saturday afternoon, while sanding down an old maple dresser, he looked over at me. Grandpa? Yeah? Will I ever work here? I set my tools down. Do you want the honest answer? Always. You'll never work here. Because you're my grandson. His expression shifted slightly. Not disappointment. Just uncertainty. Then I continued. You'll work here if you earn it. His smile came back, stronger this time. I'd rather earn it. I know you would. And he did. When he graduated from college, he didn't ask for an office, didn't expect a title, didn't use my name. He started where everyone else started. Sweeping floors, sorting lumber, learning. No special treatment, especially not for family, because this place was built on something stronger than blood. It was built on trust, respect, and the belief that everyone earns their place. Over time, something else began to take shape. Not the family we used to be. That version was gone. But something new grew in its place. Something quieter, more honest, less about appearances, more about truth. Daniel didn't try to rush it. He didn't ask for forgiveness again. He just showed up, consistently. And sometimes, that says more than words ever could. We weren't rebuilding the past. We were building something different, something real. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. On my 84th birthday, the entire workshop came alive in a way I hadn't seen before. Employees, former apprentices, veterans we had hired, young men and women who had walked through our doors uncertain and walked out with purpose. Families filled the space. Laughter echoed off the walls. For a moment, I stood back and just watched. Not the business. The people. That was the real work. Marcus stepped forward, holding a small wooden box. "I've got something," he said, grinning. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single bill, a $100 bill, the same one. The one Daniel had handed me all those years ago. I stared at it, caught off guard. "I thought you spent it," Marcus said. I smiled quietly. I never could. Instead of spending it, I had framed it years ago. Behind glass, next to a small handwritten note, Marcus lifted it up for everyone to see. Below the frame, a brass plaque had been added. It read, "Someone once believed this was enough to end a man's future. They were wrong." The room erupted into applause. I looked across the crowd. Daniel stood beside Ethan. Neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. Some things don't need to be spoken. They just need to be understood. A few months later, I signed the final paperwork. Carter Heritage Restoration would eventually become employee-owned. Not passed down automatically. Not controlled by family. Owned by the people who built it together. Because legacy isn't about blood. It's about contribution. The scholarship program